Oh, man.
Hey, Old Man on the Mat crew. This is Tony Jones coming at with you another great episode of Old Man on the Mat. Guys, I always say I'm very excited about my day. And I know I've heard you guys be sending me messages before. Are you really that excited? I really am. I really am that excited because I feel at our age, as I always say, or I'm trying to coin that phrase of our experience level, in life, you got to be excited about something. And I tell you, waking up every day is a good day. But today I'm very excited about our guest we have on today. And I'm sure some of you guys have seen this guy, seen him out there on Facebook, seen him out there on social media. He has a very lengthy bio here, and I'm telling you, it's really impressive. He has his own podcast, his Martial Arts Business Daily, which is a journal. He also is the author of Small Dojo Big Profits. I love that. And he also, which is very impressive, he has some black belt rankings in several different arts. Moo Duk Kwan, Tae Kwon Do, Hapkido, Shotokan, Jujutsu, and Krav Maga. And I tell you, one of the things on here, Shotokan, I remember the days of going to open tournaments, and every time I saw a Shotokan guy, I was like, these guys are going to hit them harder. But with that, guys, I'm very excited. And here is Michael Massie. How you doing, brother?
Hey, Tony, how you doing? Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, man, thanks for taking the time out of day. I know you're a busy guy out there, and I appreciate you more than you know, man. But, hey, let's just jump into this thing, man. What started you with all this stuff, man? Getting a martial arts career?
Well, and I do want to say, like, those black belt rankings, that didn't happen. I'm one of those guys that just collected a bunch of ranks every time. That's a product of me exploring different martial arts over a 40-year period. So I'm 53. I started taking formal martial arts when I was 13 years old, and I actually developed an interest in the martial arts when I was about 8. I was a poor kid, came from a very poor family. I was a scrawny kid, and I was also a nerd, compared to my classmates. Yeah, compared to my classmates, I was considered to be, like an anomaly in the school that I went to. This was back in the days when they didn't have gifted and talented programs, and
yeah,
I was the type of kid that I would, dive into the curriculum coursework for the semester and finish it all in 2 weeks. And then, my teacher would just be like, they wouldn't know what to do with me. So they just send me to the library. I'd get a stack of books, and I'd just sit there and read books or encyclopedias or whatever the teacher had in the classroom for the rest of the semester.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, and I wore thick glasses too on top of that. So it made me kind of a target for bullying.
Oh, yeah.
So developed an interest in martial arts through the library. And then one of my classmates, a kid named Brian Varner, his dad was a 4th Dan in Shotokan karate. And he would do demonstrations at the local air shows and stuff for the local air college there. We lived near St. Louis in a little town called Dupo, Illinois, near Cahokia, if you know where that is.
Okay, yep.
And so I went to one of those demonstrations and got hooked. And I kept begging my mom to send me to martial arts classes, and she wouldn't do it. She ended up taking me to gymnastics classes of all things, which I hated. And one thing led to another, and then over the summer, she got my uncle. My uncle was a narcotics officer, and he was a TO for a guy who was a Taekwondo instructor in the town where he lived in. And so I went and stayed with my grandma for the summer, and my mom had my uncle enroll me in Taekwondo classes with that guy, and that was it. I was hooked.
Oh, wow. What drew you so much to that art once you started it? Because, I'm sure you're the same. We're close to the same age. And in that era, we saw the Kung Fu theaters and all those kind of shows that just drew us into that. Was Taekwondo, when you first joined in there, is similar to that or just something totally different?
Well, it's kind of interesting because before that, I had taken informal classes, backyard classes with a guy named Jack Gross. And Jack was an ICU in, he was an ICU in Kyokushinkai, I believe. And then he had been taking classes at the local karate studio there in town, which was a Keishinkan Shiraru studio. This was in Jefferson City, Missouri. And Jack had been training for a number of years, and he was probably, I'd say, like at least 3rd Dan in his skill level, but he just didn't care about rank. He was an ex-Army Ranger, Vietnam era and whatnot.
Oh, man.
It was kind of funny because I was chasing around his little girl at the time, and that went nowhere.
Yeah,
but the martial arts did. And so I would go over to her house, kind of hang out with her. And Jack, he was an engineer for the state of Missouri, and he would get a couple of quarts of Stag beer in him. And he'd be in there watching Chuck Norris movies and watching Black Fighting Kings, documentaries like that.
Oh, yeah.
And then he'd call me in he'd call me later and he'd be like, Mike, come in here. I got something to show you. And I'd just go in there and he'd beat me up, But I loved it. So Jack was always telling me stories about his days in the military, and one of the things that he told me about was witnessing a demonstration that was given to the Rangers by Micah Chanis and a lot of those Warangdo guys. And those guys back in the day, they were involved in the Jedi program. Where if you watch the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats, you get kind of a
Yes.
comedic interpretation of that.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
based on an actual book that was written by an investigative journalist, and it's actually pretty
Okay.
interesting. If you read the book's much better, even though the movie's entertaining.
Yeah.
But that's what got me kind of interested in the Korean martial arts because Jack was all about Kyokushinkai, and we'd sit there and we'd watch those documentaries like Black Fighting Kings and The Warrior Within and stuff in his living room, and I saved it all up.
Yeah.
But he told me one time, he said, I got to tell you something, Mike. Those Hwarangdo guys, those are the baddest dudes I've ever seen. And of course, you're a kid, you're going to believe anything your instructor tells you.
Oh,
And it just stuck
absolutely.
with me. So I had it in my head that I was going to be, I don't know, that I think I was going to be like a Hwarangdo warrior or something like that. I don't know. So that's what drew me to Korean martial arts. But, during the school year, I would take classes at the Keishinkan school, the Shida-Ryu school. And then I would go down to South Texas in the summer, stay with my grandma at my grandma's house and train with this Taekwondo guy. Well, what was interesting was the Taekwondo instructor, the style he taught was Chang Kwan, which derives from Shotokan karate, which
Okay.
incidentally was the style that my friend Brian Varner's dad did. And the styles were identical. The only difference were the forms. So I would go down and train for the summer. I was doing the exact same thing between the different schools. And then the Taekwondo instructor would talk bad about the karate instructors. The karate instructors talked bad about the Taekwondo. It was just typical 1980s martial arts
Yep.
BS. Same thing that happens today online.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
right.
what got me started. And after that, once I got to a certain age, I started branching out into other arts. I went to live with my brother in Denver, Colorado when I was a teenager, when I was about 16, 17. And I wanted to train with a high ranking Shotokan black belt that had a school in downtown Denver, but it would have been like a 2 hour bus ride or hour and a half bus ride or
Yeah.
something for where I was living up in Westminster. But there was a guy who taught Kung Fu, and he was a world kickboxing champion, a WKA kickboxing champion. He was friends with Dennis Alexio. I think Alexio would go and train at his school when he was in town and stuff.
That's old school.
This,
Wow.
yeah, this guy trained professional kickboxers. I think a guy named Mark Longo was one of his top fighters at the time. And so I went and I started training with him. And I wasn't really working at the time. My brother was taking care of me. So I just ride the bus in. And incidentally, I wasn't going to school at this time either.
Oh, jeez.
So I would just ride the bus to his studio, and I'd clean up a studio for him and help him train his fighters and stuff. And he was giving me private lessons. The guy was really cool. His name was Mike Jones. And, I don't know, Mike, if you're listening to this, look me up because I'd like to talk to you. He was a good guy.
That'd be
Mike really
awesome.
took care of me. But he introduced me to the world of full contact. And I'll never forget the first time he paired me off with one of his green belts. I was a brown belt at the time. I thought it was hot stuff.
Yeah.
And so he pairs me off with one of his green belts, and the guy just side kicks me as hard as he can in the face. Just the first thing he did. Just
Holy cow.
side kicked me as hard as he could in the face.
Oh.
My nose was kind of bleeding, and I was kind of stunned, and I was like, "Huh, okay, that's interesting, cool."
Yeah.
And I, every day, man, I'd get in the ring with Mike, and Mike would just kick me all over the ring, and I loved it. And so that got me interested in more, I'd say, more combative arts because I realized that what I was training in wasn't very practical. So
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. But back in the day though, but you talk about the 80s and in those days, those era were hardcore though. Like
yeah,
I was talking to a guy about it before, and it was just, there were not a whole lot of mats on the floor. Even doing judo, you're getting thrown on carpet and
yeah.
all that stuff, So a lot of it translated to the streets, but then again, you had a lot of arts that were just forms too.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like every dojo I went to back then, it was the dojo floor would be indoor outdoor carpet with no padding on concrete, and
Exactly.
you get thrown and slammed on that, and then later on when I was in the military, I actually got to train with one of Micah Chanis's students, and this guy was actually a high ranking black belt in Moo Duk Kwan and Hapkido. It was Grandmaster Jim McMurray out of Killeen, Texas. And Grandmaster McMurray, man, he was hardcore, and we would train at this local recreation center. This is during the time when I was a red belt with him when I was in the service. When I got out, I continued to travel up and train with him so I could get my black belts in him
Awesome.
under him in Hapkido and Taekwondo.
Yeah.
And they would just throw us all over the place just on like it was just a tile floor.
Yeah.
Just tile on
Yeah.
concrete, no mats or anything, and we just ate it up. So
Yeah. Well, I won't say we were tougher, but I'm going to say it, but no one heard that, right? We were
Well,
tougher back
I
then,
I
man.
think I don't know, man. I think it was a different era, you know. All us Gen
Yeah.
Xers, you know, we like to think that, you know, we're hot stuff.
Right,
But
right.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know,
Right.
man. And then I get out on the mat today with some of these young kids and I'm like, man, I don't know. Maybe I
Man, they're
wasn't as tough as
brutal.
I thought I was.
Exactly. I tell you, I'm the oldest guy on the mat, man, and these guys are tying me up in knots, and I'm like, "Whoo, I need to be on the couch somewhere, man." You know.
Yeah. But you know, you're never going to quit either because it's in your blood, you know, and
Exactly, man. Exactly.
yeah.
I was talking to a guy yesterday. It was I was training yesterday in some Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, jammed my finger. And I'm like, let me tape it up. And my coach is just telling me hey, sit down, man. You're doing so rough around. Just have a seat. I said, no, I want to get back. And he just finally said, sit down. And it dawned on me, it was all ego, man. It's
Yeah.
just all ego want to get in there. And at our age, our experience level, we need to drop that sometimes, right?
Yeah. And you know, when you came up in martial arts old school, you know, there was several concepts, you know, like in Japanese martial arts, there's a concept of kokoro or heart, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
of having lots of heart, you know, like you dig deep, you know, you don't quit. And then in the Chinese martial arts is this concept of eating bitter, you know, like
Okay.
you have to go through hardship in order to succeed. And you know, that stuff sticks with you. And then as you get older, you know, in my head, I'm still 25 years old. You know,
Right.
my body
Right.
disagrees, but in my head, I'm still 25 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, you know, I've been through some pretty significant, physical challenges over the last couple of years,
Yeah.
and I'm having to learn all over again how to modulate what I do in training in order to be able to continue training.
All right.
And a lot
Gotcha.
of that has to do with stuff in that ego. So
Yeah, it is. It is. Now, how do you deal with that? And like you was just saying, you went through some injuries. You're on that road to recover. You recover. How do you deal with that mental challenge? You know what I mean? That
yeah,
pulls us back on the mat. That pulls us to do things sooner than we should.
well, I think to answer that question, I probably need to give some backstory. So, like I
Yeah.
said, I've done martial arts for 4 decades, and I was a professional instructor for 20 years. Um, during the lockdowns during COVID, it was man, it was like New Year's of 2021. I got COVID, and
Okay.
about 3 or 4 days later, I started coughing up blood.
Oh,
Well, you know, this was actually during that snowpocalypse we had, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and so I couldn't get the doctor for about 2 weeks. And when I finally got to the doctor, you know, the doctor's like, "Hey, you know, we need to get you a chest X-ray." They found a mass in my right lung,
oh wow.
and it turned out to be cancerous. And it wasn't just cancerous; it was a sarcoma, an angiosarcoma. Which,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll never forget when the pulmonologist sat down because you know he did the needle biopsy on me and he brought me in and he sat me down. He's like, "Man," he's like, "you have cancer." And then I was like, "Okay." He's like, "I see these all the time." This was after actually the CT scan. He was talking about the CT scan and how he was going to do the biopsy.
Yeah.
After he did the biopsy, I had to call him to get my diagnosis because nobody wanted to give me my diagnosis because nobody wanted to deal with it because it was
Wow.
so dire. And I can remember
Wow.
talking to him on the phone and him just apologizing over and over and over again. And my background's in healthcare. I was a medic in the military.
Oh wow.
So I knew it was bad. So immediately I sit down in my car in the parking lot and I look up angiosarcoma of the lung. And the information I got was horrible.
Oh,
So
I
I call up my
bet.
wife. I'm like, "Babe, it's not good." And that started about a 2 year journey of just fighting to maintain my health and then to keep the tumor stable and then to more or less fighting for my life, although
Yeah.
it never got to the point to where I was near death, but it was considered to be a terminal diagnosis and they didn't want to operate on me because the tumor was so large.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a certain cutoff point with angiosarcomas at which the survivability rate is very low if they operate on you. And
If they are on you? Oh wow.
yeah, and so yeah, because what happens is they operate on you and the tumors tend to metastasize, and then
Mm,
and being a medic, I understand triage and I understand you want to work on patients that have the highest rates of survivability. So I understood that, but it was
gotcha.
very frustrating because angiosarcomas don't respond well to chemotherapy. They definitely don't respond well to radiation. In most cases, I mean, like
Yeah.
I think the best study that I found for a chemotherapy agent that I could find was about a 37% success rate.
Wow.
So, and many times, and especially because later on we found out that I have a different type of angiosarcoma that's even more rare, and only
Holy
about
cow.
1,200 people a year get these, right?
Yeah.
So there's virtually no treatment for it because it doesn't benefit the drug companies to develop treatments for it. I could go
Right.
on and on about this, but
I get it. Dollars and cents.
so
Yep.
yeah. So eventually we found a surgeon that was skilled enough to take the right upper lobe of my lung out with the tumor, encapsulate it so it wouldn't metastasize, so we wouldn't get any cross contamination of the tumor cells when he took it out. He did it minimally invasively about a year ago. It was May of
Yeah.
last year. So far, I'm clear, but
Praise
now
God.
I've got reduced lung capacity, and
Okay.
my immune system's trashed and all kinds of other stuff that goes along with having, cancer. So,
Yeah.
that's what I'm dealing with right now. And coming back to the
Wow.
mats was extremely challenging because, number one, you're short of breath all the time. Like you
Right.
just feel like you can never catch your breath. And there's this threshold, like I can push myself and push myself because I'm accustomed to pushing myself physically, but I can only push myself so far. And then all of a sudden it's like falling off a cliff. It's like
Wow.
it's like you're getting smothered, like you just can't get any air in your lungs. It feels like anyway. Some of it's psychological, but some of
Okay.
it is physical. So I've been having to deal with that and learning how to retrain my body to where, I have to stay relaxed during training. I have to pace myself during training.
Okay.
I haven't done a whole lot of rolling yet because I'm just getting to the point where my body's getting used to the activity, and I'm actually
Okay.
reconditioning myself. But, I roll a little bit with my son and, I've rolled with a couple of blue belts at the academy and, it's just, if I just I have to be the most relaxed jujitsu practitioner in the world in order to be able to stay on the mats.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's crazy, because I'm not used to being that way. But, on the other hand, is it frustrating? Yeah. But on the other hand, I look at it in light of the fact that, you know, I don't think any of my doctors expect me to be here now.
That's true. That's
So
true.
just being on the mats is a triumph, you know?
Wow.
But I just have to stuff my ego and I have to realize, my training goals are much different now than they were when I was younger or before I had cancer.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so right now it's all about being able to train with my son, who's in the adult class now,
Yeah.
and training for the mental health benefits, because it's a
Oh, yeah.
huge stress relief. When I couldn't train when I was sick, I realized how much of a mental health boost, of an emotional boost that training was. And when
Yeah.
I just couldn't train, I didn't have a way to release a lot of the tension and stress and all those other things that we deal with on a regular basis. And those were
Oh, yeah.
magnified by my illness and all the stress of
Absolutely.
worrying like, what's my family going to do without me?
Yeah.
How are they going to survive? How can I prepare for that? How can I prepare them for that? And these are all things you face on a daily basis when you have a terminal cancer diagnosis. So it was rough, and I had to, and I got into meditation and all kinds of other stuff that I probably should have been into anyway. But
Yeah.
nothing can replace just exhausting yourself physically, especially in simulated single combat with another person for stress relief.
Right.
And you cannot overstate the value of that to an individual.
Wow. Until it's not there anymore.
Yep.
Wow, my gosh, man. Praise God, man. You're on the
Yeah.
upbeat and you're moving still in there. Now, what else are you doing to, to buid that up? And this is just taking me to a whole different direction here. Any other outside activities that you're doing? I know you said you look at meditating, you're doing that more.
Mhm.
Is there anything that's going to bring your, lung capacity back to quote unquote 100%?
Well, when here's what's interesting because I kept myself in such good shape beforehand, even though I was, a guy in his 50s. As a matter of fact, at the time I got sick with COVID, well, I take that back. Okay. So when the tumor actually showed up on an x-ray was about 7 months before they officially found it. And it was an x-ray that was taken at my chiropractor's office.
Hmm.
And that was a few months after I got the jab. And I don't want to
Okay.
go into all the stuff about the COVID vaccines and all that because that's very
Gotcha.
controversial. But
Yeah.
I
Gotcha.
will say I got the jab, and then within 2 weeks, I started feeling short of breath. And
Mm,
then the tumor showed up about 2 months later on my x ray. So who knows if it was connected or not. But
right.
before I got that jab, it was during the pandemic. I had moved I was teaching Krav Maga at the time. I'd been doing
Hmm.
Krav Maga for about 6, 7 years at that time. And I was teaching Krav Maga, several nights a week. And I moved all the classes into my house in order to be able to continue to train. And so I
Right.
was teaching small group, semi private lessons and private lessons in my house. And I was sparring, 45 minutes in a session, maybe 3, 4 days a week. I was sparring with my private clients, because a lot of
Yeah.
the approach that I take to Krav Maga is very heavily influenced by my Jeet Kune Do instructor, Bert Richardson.
Okay.
And Bert's all about sparring, and he's all about getting rounds, and
Yeah.
so, I was just doing endless rounds of sparring with my students. And dude, I was in the best shape I've been in since my 30s.
Wow.
And, so I will say that um, the transition, being able to transition back into training without being able to work that intensely has been extremely challenging. So I've had
Okay.
to find ways to make up for that conditioning, because if I push myself extremely hard in class, 4, 5, 6 days a week like I used to, I'll just get sick. Like
Right.
right now I'm fighting a bronchial infection from training too hard last week.
Oh, wow.
So what I do is I do other things to to kind of simulate the training. I'll do interval training, like short sessions.
Okay.
So I learn to modulate the intensity and the duration, the frequency of my workouts. Right. So this is going back to personal trainer 101 and
Right.
programming 101. So for example, I might do a high intensity workout, but I might only do it for 10 minutes, because if I go
Okay.
longer than that, it's pushing my body too hard. Or I'll do
Hmm.
a low intensity workout, like, low intensity static state, training.
Right.
And I'll do that for maybe like 40 minutes on the treadmill.
Okay.
Or, I'll go out in the garage and I'll do strength training. And instead of doing, like an hour long strength training session like I used to do, I'll go a little bit more intense, but I'll only do it for 20 minutes. And
Okay.
that's
Okay.
enough to condition my body to where when I do get out on the mats, I'm able to do the things that I want to do. I'm not to be performing at the highest level or at the level I want to be performing at, but at least I can do it.
Right. Right. Now, are you doing anything nutritional wise also?
Yeah, although I will say, I practically starved myself for 2 years, because one of the theories about what makes cancers grow and metastasize is that carbohydrates and sugar
Sugar and
make them
carbohydrate. You're
grow
absolutely
and
right. Yep.
metastasize, right?
Yep.
So I pretty much starved myself. I stayed on a mostly plant-based diet, and then I went pescatarian when my blood count started to crash. And I went
Okay.
pescatarian just because, I was experiencing anemia and, low white blood cell counts and so forth. So I started adding a little bit of fish back in my diet. But I was
Okay.
also fasting, doing intermittent fasting every day, and then I would fast anywhere between 1 and 3 days a week.
Okay.
Like do water fast and things like that. And the whole like
Yeah.
the whole theory behind that is that you're trying to starve the cancer. And the
Right.
problem with it is it only works for so long. What they found in studies is that when you do fasting, you can actually kill cancer cells with fasting, but eventually, if you don't get that cancer taken out of your body, if you don't get the what the original tumor, which is where
Uh-huh.
all the other tumors metastasize from. And remember, I'm not a doctor. None of this is qualified
Right. Right.
medical advice, right?
I
This is
read a
just
lot
from
on
my own.
this also. I
Yeah,
get it.
this is from my own personal experience. But if you don't get that original cancer tumor, the original cancer site taken out of your body, the cancer is just going to come back, and it's going to come back stronger, because
Mm.
cancer is unlike any other disease that we know of, because it's all about mutation. And cancer cells can mutate like crazy to adapt to changing circumstances. It's one of the reasons why you'll see people that chemotherapy and the cancer goes away for a while, then it comes back, like with a vengeance.
Yeah. Right.
So, but I did starve myself for a couple of years. So I will say, with this caveat, that lately I've been probably making Mary maybe a little bit too much. I put on maybe a little bit too much weight, but
Okay. Gotcha.
I try to stay to a mostly plant-based diet. I try to keep my protein intake, animal protein intake fairly low, just because, not because I think animal protein is bad. I love barbecue. I love meat,
Yeah. Right.
but it tends to be inflammatory, and I really
Okay.
have to watch inflammation because of my health background. So I try to stick to a low inflammation diet and drink plenty of water, stay away from sugary beverages, try to keep my carbohydrate intake low and so forth. So
Right.
that's what I do nutritionally, and I do other things. I do cold plunging.
Do you really?
Yeah, do a
Okay.
lot of cold plunging. Do infrared sauna work. Sometimes I do Wim Hof breathing. I
What
don't
is that?
tolerate.
Is that the diamond or the pyramid? I'm sorry. Or the
No, Wim Hof is the Iceman. He's the guy that kind of made cold plunging, kind of fashionable at this time.
okay.
He's the guy they call the Iceman. He's a really cool. I've never met him, but he's an interesting character.
Okay.
But he has specific breathing methods that actually were very helpful to me when I was sick. And so sometimes I'll do his breathing methods and things like that. Anything I can do to boost my immune system and kind of improve that hormone profile, so
Okay.
I keep my immune system strong. I'll do.
Gotcha.
And then of
Man,
course
that's,
supplementation. Take a ton of supplements.
do you really? What do you take usually?
Well, on a daily basis, there are certain supplements I take that have, that have some clinical evidence of being anti-cancer, having anti-cancer benefits.
Mhm.
So, I get up in the morning and I'll take, let's see here, I'm trying to run through all of them in my head. Quercetin, curcumin,
Mhm.
alpha lipoic acid, and green tea extract. So I take those 3 to 4 times a day. I'm also taking large doses of vitamin D a day. Well, what most people would consider large, but it's really not. I take
Yeah.
about 15,000 IU of vitamin D a day, along with vitamin K.
Okay.
Um, I
K2
take,
works together.
yeah, I take large doses of vitamin C as well, anywhere from 4 grams to 20 grams a day, depending on the day.
Okay.
I take a B supplement, but I only take methylated B12 and folate, and that's mostly for my energy. And really, if you've had cancer, you probably shouldn't be taking a B complex vitamin because it's been shown to, sometimes in some studies they think that there's a correlation between people that take vitamin B12 and then the cancer growth, tumor growth.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I take a lot of greens, a lot of green supplements, take
Yeah.
kelp and, different algaes and things of that nature and so forth, and then also drinking a lot of juice, a lot of fresh juice, anything that's not sugary.
Yeah. My gosh, man, I'm telling you, listening to what you're saying here, and I think one of the biggest thing I picked up is from you saying you were healthy beforehand.
Yeah.
So that helped a ton. I'm assuming. I'm just standing on the outside looking in.
Well, I'll tell you something. It's interesting because every time I would go to the doctor's office, and here's what's interesting is when they first found this tumor, I was seeing the an oncologist who was considered to be one of the best oncologists in the area at the local cancer clinic here in Austin, which is
Mhm.
huge. They see like 900,000 patients a year or something like that,
Wow.
right? Which kind of tells you about how prevalent cancer is in today's society.
Exactly.
But this guy, he just straight up looked at me. He's like, "You have sarcoma. I can't do anything for you." He's like, "You got to go to MD Anderson. You got to see a specialist." And there's only a handful of these specialists in the country. I mean, they're very rare. So I was seeing a specialist, and every time I go see my specialist in Houston, which was about, at first we were going about every couple of months, and then it was about 4 times a year.
Yeah.
And every time I saw her, she was just amazed. She's like, "You're just the atypical patient." Well, what she didn't know is because the tumor was changing shape, which meant it was still active. And, I was coughing up blood and all kinds of stuff too,
Mm. Uh,
just, I had all these dire signs of the point at which when you're a cancer patient where the cancer starts to go into overdrive, but it wasn't.
mm.
And the reason why is because of all the stuff I was doing at home. I was on a cocktail of off-label medications. I was
Yeah.
working with a physician who was also a cancer patient who has survived active cancer in her body for, a long period of time. Very
Yeah.
intelligent person, trained at Johns Hopkins and took a very scientific approach. I mean, we just threw everything but the kitchen sink at this thing. And I believe in my heart that and the grace of God is what kept the tumor stable until we could find a surgeon to take it out.
Wow.
But what they would always say is they'd say, the fact that you were in such good health beforehand and the fact that you're still active, because no matter what, I got to be confident. I mean, I still taught martial arts for the first 7 months. You
Really?
know,
Still going through
yeah,
all that?
yeah, I was still in,
Wow.
and it got to the point to where I was taking so much punishment because I teach Krav and I teach some of the Jeet Kune Do and MMA principles in my Krav classes and do a lot of kickboxing with it as well. A lot of full contact stuff. And so I was taking a lot of punishment, and I'd come home from class in really bad shape. And I just got to the point where I was like, you know what, it's just not safe. And the other thing
Yeah.
was the tumor was right next to my pulmonary artery.
Yeah.
And at first, the doctors were worried that the tumor was going to eat into the pulmonary artery and that I would end up, having essentially an aneurysm.
Yeah.
Um, so it was just unsafe, and I had to stop teaching. But I still kept training.
Uh,
I'd go out in the garage and do my solo training, whatever I could do, and and then come inside and cough up a little blood and go about my day.
Oh
So
man.
it's just
Wow.
it's just what you do.
Right. Holy cow. You didn't have time to sit around and feel sorry for yourself, and that's
Oh, I
pretty
I
awesome.
did some of that too. I'm
Well,
not
I'm
gonna
sure you
lie.
did. Trust me. I'm sure you did.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm not superhuman,
but,
man.
but I
I
get it though.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell you, like and men are ashamed. A lot of men are ashamed to talk about this stuff. But I'm gonna tell you
Yeah.
something. When this happened, I cried every night for 3 weeks straight. And I didn't cry for myself. I didn't cry for my future. I cried for my family. You know,
Yeah.
I
I
was
get
crying
it.
out to God. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do for my family? How am I going to take care of my family? What's my family going to do without me?
Yeah.
How's my little boy going to grow up without, all that
Yeah.
stuff. And that's where the tears came from, and I think that's all part actually of being a man and being a protector and being a father and a husband, is that that should be the first priority on your list, and it should be the first thing you think about when something
Yeah.
happens to you.
You're absolutely right. You are
So
absolutely right,
yeah.
man. But you hit it on the head though too. And I think men nowadays, and whatever it is, we're shamed into not crying. We're shamed into not showing our emotions, regardless of where they are. Because we hear everything. If it's anger, is toxic. Hear all these things, or men shouldn't
Yeah.
cry.
Yeah.
All this stuff. And I
Yeah.
think we get. I'm not gonna say, "Well, it's me," but we get the raw end of the stick a lot of time when it comes to expressing yourself emotionally. And
Yeah.
for you to cry like that and to express yourself, and I'm sure your wife was with you,
Mhm.
helping you through this process. That's huge, man. That is
Yeah.
huge.
Well, you have to process things. And I'll tell you something. It got to the point, toward the end of the illness before I had surgery, where I was so sick, and I went through other things too, like I had selenium toxicity for a while, which can be deadly.
Really?
And yeah, and it was all yeah, I think it was because of, all the medications and supplements I was taking. Probably my liver and my kidneys weren't working the best, probably my liver
Mm-hmm.
wasn't clearing out toxins well. And so that made me even sicker. And, I honestly, hang on, got to fix my computer here. Okay,
No, do
so
your thing, man.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
okay.
because I was worried I was going to drop you out for a second, but toward the end there, I got to the point to where all I could focus on was my survival. I
Yeah.
couldn't focus on anything else. I was so tired all the time, and just I would force myself to do cardio for 45 minutes a day, and do some different
Wow.
workouts and things like that. But it was all about survival. It was all about my fasting regimen and my cold plunging regimen and my breathing regimen and my all my self care stuff that I did, infrared therapy and heat therapy, and taking my supplements and taking the off label medication cocktail I was taking. And it's just that was all I could do, was do whatever I had to do to keep myself alive until we could find a surgeon to take it out. And
Wow.
honestly, you get to the point to where you're not focusing on anything else. So everything that's happened to you traumatically, and I know trauma is an overused term. Everybody talks about, oh, I was
Yeah.
traumatized by this, I was traumatized by
That's
that.
all you hear
Well,
nowadays. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm not a professional victim by any means. And
Right.
but I will say, going through an experience like this, it is traumatic, because it affects your family, it affects everything, it affects every
Yeah.
aspect of your life. It affects you financially. It's
Oh, yeah.
taken me a year, just to dig out of the financial hole we were in from the treatment and stuff. And
Oh, absolutely.
so when I came out of it a few months after the surgery, when I was really feeling well, and it kind of hit me that I'm like, you don't have to worry about fighting cancer every day of my life. That's when everything started to hit me, and I started to process all the stuff I've been through. And it's
Wow.
interesting because at that time, I went through a really rough period. You would think that you get this cancer removed from your body, and then all of a sudden everything's going to be hunky dory. It's just going to
Right.
be all sunshine and rainbows. And actually, I had to go through a period of processing the whole experience and going, wow, how did this affect me, and how am I dealing with it? And, what am I doing with myself now? Where am I going to go? Where's my focus going to be? How has this changed me?
Wow.
And things that, it's interesting because people will say going through a so-called near-death experience or looking death in the face changes you.
Yeah.
And for me, it made me realize that many of the things that I thought were important beforehand are not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So many
Yeah.
things that I'd placed priorities on, like work and earning a living, and being competitive in the workplace and being an entrepreneur and so forth. Those things now take a back seat to spending time with my son, spending time with my family, and enjoying
Absolutely.
life.
Absolutely. Wow. But that's it though, man. That's maybe it, I don't want to be the guy to say, well, everything happens for a reason, which I do believe to a certain
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
But it put you in a different perspective though. That's pretty
hmm
awesome, man. That you got all that out of that. And look where you are today. Are you on the climb now again? Or
Well, I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna do with my career now, because, I taught martial arts for 20 years, and then I got into doing consulting work for martial arts studio owners, and did that for quite some time. I'm still doing some of that on the side, but it's not a priority for me anymore. And I am right now. I've kind of resolved that I'm only going to do things that bring me joy.
mm,
And it's not necessarily that I'm only going to do things that are easy, but I am only going to do things that bring me joy. I'll do something hard if I find it joyful, right?
Right.
And one of the things that I've resolved not to do anymore is to overwork, is
Mm,
to be a workaholic, because that took time away from my family. It took time away from spending quality time with my child. It
yeah.
took time away from, many things. And, work can become a surrogate for relationships and for
True.
having healthy relationships in your life. And, I think I was at that point in my life. I mean, during the pandemic, I was running three businesses, because I'm a full-time writer, and that's where most of
Right.
my income comes from now. I write fiction, nonfiction books, and have a publishing company. And
That's
then I was doing
awesome.
consulting work, and then I was teaching martial arts. So I was probably working 60, 70 hours a week out of my house, during the
Easily.
pandemic.
Wow.
Just it was just nuts. And for what?
Yeah.
Just so I can make a few thousand extra bucks a month, and yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that's fine. But how much money do you need?
Yeah. Good
You know,
point.
how how much recognition do you need? And whose recognition do you need? Do I need the world's recognition, or do I need to be recognized, by my creator firstly, and then also by my family? Do I need
Right.
my family to look at me and look up to me and go, he's a good father, he's a good husband.
Right.
What's more important?
Wow. That's awesome. How does your family feel about your newfound vision now?
Well, there's a period of adaptation, and I think that they're used to seeing me. Yeah, they're used to be seeing me be a different person.
Hmm.
And I will say, in some ways, I care about certain things a lot less now too. And I'd say in some ways I'm maybe a little bit more rough around the edges now because I just don't care about putting on airs and and
I
things
get
like
it.
that. So I think it's a little bit of an adjustment period for them too. But I'll say that it's good knowing that for example, like like I took my son on a trip. We just went out of town by ourselves, a couple of weeks ago,
Oh,
and it
that's
was just
cool.
fun. It was just fun, hanging out and spending time together and just us, doing a guy's weekend. And I think honestly, he's a teenager, so by the end of the weekend, he was probably sick of me.
He was ready to go. Yeah.
But it's good, or just hanging out and just spending some time with my wife, just going, hey, let's go for a walk, or let's cook a meal together, or just whatever.
Yeah.
Those little moments, they mean a lot, and you don't realize how much those little moments and those seemingly insignificant memories will mean to you. When you're facing down death on a daily basis. So.
Wow. And did you get to the point where you were stopped thinking about tomorrow, just like, you know what, it's all over. Let me just, succumb to this feeling. It's over. There's no tomorrow anyway.
No,
Okay.
because here's the thing: when you're facing cancer, any terminal illness, um, you honestly, you never want to reach a point where you give up.
Okay.
You have to resolve deep within yourself that you're never going to give up. That you're never going to stop fighting. It's the people who stop fighting that the cancer. It's funny. There's a field of science called psychoneuroimmunology,
Mhm.
which is the studies the relationship between our mental state, our emotional state, and our immune system. And certain studies have shown that the more positive you are, that positive psychology has a definite impact, positive impact on your immune system.
Yeah.
And so you have to resolve within yourself to say, you know what, I'm gonna keep fighting. I'm gonna keep fighting. There's no quit in me. Just no matter what happens, the fight is all that matters. And every day I would
Right.
wake up and I'd be like, I'm fighting. And you have to set goals for yourself too. And I'd set a goal for myself. I was like, I want to see my kid graduate from high school. That was one of the
Yeah.
goals I set, and
Yeah.
you have to actually, see that in your head, like see yourself actually attending your kid's graduation ceremony and attending your child's wedding, and seeing your grandkids, having your grandkids sitting in your lap. These are all things that create this fire within you that just won't be put out. And you got to keep stoking that fire if you want to make it.
Wow. Visualization. That's pretty awesome, man.
Yeah.
Do you think your mindset came from who you are before, or just because your experience through the martial arts, or just things like that?
Martial arts has a lot to do with it because, if if you do martial arts, and I would say not just necessarily traditional martial arts, but if you're a real martial artist, somebody who um, in which your martial arts practice, Budo plays a central role.
Mhm.
The way of the warrior, the way of war. um, discipline, you gain discipline no matter what.
Right.
Discipline it's a natural side effect of training in that way, year after year after year. And so that discipline served me well because I was already naturally disciplined. So it wasn't hard for me to discipline myself to create daily routines in order to do as much as I could to battle the disease. And I've
Right.
often said, I tell people, because I've kind of counseled or coached or helped a couple of people who've faced pretty serious cancer diagnoses
Yeah.
and kind of helped them with the stuff I did. And one thing I'll always tell people is that cancer is a war of inches. You know, Many times
Okay.
people face cancer and they think, well, they're just kind of passive about it. And they're just like, well, I'm just going to go and do whatever my oncologist says. My
Right.
oncologist says surgery, I do surgery. They say chemo, I do chemo. They say radiation, I do get radiation. The problem is that about 60% of the cancer patients in the nation are not getting personalized cancer care. And the problem is that there are over 300 different types of cancer, and
Mm.
each one of those cancers has different characteristics, different genetic characteristics, and mutational characteristics, and so forth. So
Right.
without actually analyzing your specific type of cancer and then developing specific tactics and strategies in order to fight your cancer specifically, you're not getting the best care. So that
Right.
passivity in care is actually killing people. It's not the doctors that are doing it. The doctors are just doing their job.
Right.
But um, I I I I went about it like I was going to war. And
Hmm.
I think that discipline of being in the martial arts and having that mindset, that kind of warrior mindset. And I hesitate to use the word warrior because I think the word warrior is thrown around too much these days as well.
Good
You know,
point.
to me, a warrior is somebody who's gone to war.
Yeah.
But at least I could borrow some concepts from people who have been to war and develop that mindset and say, okay, this is a battle, and I'm going to fight it with every way I can.
Right. That's pretty awesome. So you dove into this thing. You didn't just like you said. You just let the doctor do a thing. You dove into it on your own, also.
Yeah, well, like I said, my undergraduate degree is in health sciences, and I was a medic in the military, and you know, it's it's funny because I was like 8 credits away from finishing a nursing degree when I started
Mm.
my first dojo, and I
Hmm.
started that studio in order to to pay for college. But it took off. After it took off, I realized I'm making way more money I'll ever make as a nurse. I never finished that degree,
Oh wow.
and so I'm no expert on medicine, yeah, but I knew enough to get on PubMed and do some research.
Gotcha.
I mean, I can read a reviewed study and, I can figure out what it says. And that's what I did, Yeah, because the other thing is there's so many charlatans out there,
No,
you know.
absolutely.
There are a lot of grifters out there that are trying to take advantage of people who are facing terminal illnesses. And I
Yeah.
ran into a lot of that, and there's just so much quackery. So one of the things you have to do as a cancer patient is you have to separate the quackery from the science. And there's a lot of stuff out there. There are a lot of treatments and a lot of things you can do to assist your body in fighting cancer and surviving cancer that your doctor's not going to tell you about simply because, a lot of those studies are stuff that, they were never really pursued by any corporation or company or big pharma or whatever because there
Right.
was no money in it.
Right.
If it's a treatment that's not patentable, like if there's a drug that's been on the market for 30 years and it's a generic drug that nobody can patent, nobody's going to develop that as a treatment
That's right.
because there's
That's
no
right.
money in it.
That's
So
right.
you have to dig up that stuff yourself.
Wow. But because you didn't live your life to somebody else though. That's
No,
pretty
no, you
awesome.
can't. That's the other thing is you cannot be passive as a cancer patient. And if you're passive, passive patients and patients who give up don't last long.
Yeah. Man.
Anybody who survived it will tell you that.
Oh yeah, my sister's going through that now, and she's
Oh God, I'm
she's
so
doing a
sorry.
lot of. Oh, I appreciate that, but she's going through a lot of research on it on her own, and I know people that, just in myself, and I don't have any major illnesses, but I'm into the nutrition. I try to take all the supplements. I do research what I can do, and to listen to stuff that you've been taking, I'm like, I take some of that too. I take some of this, but just listening to your story, my gosh, it gives me so much hope. I mean, I have no excuses for. I don't feel like working out today. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, it's funny because I'll go to class and right now most I train one day a week with my son and then I train another day a week with, any training partner that I find in class, right?
Yeah.
And I'm mostly just going to fundamentals classes and working out at home,
Yeah.
because, I'm trying not to push my body too hard. I'm trying to ease back into training because
Hmm.
when I first recovered from surgery, I jumped right back into training and I actually set myself back several months.
Oh, I can
So
believe that.
now I'm
Yeah.
easing back into it again and kind of, finding, what my body can do and so forth. But, you know, um, I'll get on the mat sometimes, or it'll be time to get ready for class. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, man, do you really want to do this today? Why don't you just stay
Hmm.
home and rest, and I'll start making excuses. Then I think of my buddy he's a third degree black belt in the Jose Gomez lineage.
Hmm.
And so, this guy, he's been training jujitsu for, 20 years, I think. And he's a good friend of mine, but he was also did 26 years in the infantry. When I
Oh.
met him, he was in the Wounded Warrior Brigade on Fort Hood. And the reason why he was in the
Oh.
Wounded Warrior Brigade was because he'd been caught in the blast wave of an ammo dump cook-off that happened
Oh.
when he was in Iraq. Threw him across the barracks, and he broke his back on a
Holy
bunch of
cow.
those metal containers. If you've been in the military, you know what I'm talking about. They have these big, huge metal containers they ship stuff in,
Holy
and his
cow.
back's all put together. This guy Jim, he's an awesome guy, but his back's all put together with titanium rods and stuff, man, and screws. And yet
Holy cow.
he still trains. He still does jujitsu. He's like, I can't do the stuff that I used to do. And his game's completely changed. He's like, I got to play a game that's totally different, so I don't screw up my
Yeah.
back. But the guy still trains,
Still trains,
And so
man. That
I
takes.
think about him. Anytime I'm trying to make excuses, I got no excuse, man.
Man, you know what? Listening to your story, no joke, man. I'm telling you, that gives me a different perspective on training because, we get to a certain age, and I know me personally, I'm thinking, I deserve to take it off a little bit. I put in 40 years of training. I can relax today. I could do this today. No, I don't have that excuse anymore. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man, for telling your story. No joke, man. I'm serious. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming out telling your story. Now, when did you start writing books?
So my first studio, I started my first studio in the early '90s, and I tell the whole story in the book. And I failed like 3 or 4 times before I got a studio up and running. And the reason why I got the studio up and running was because I got a business mentor. His name was Jim Mather, and Jim Mather, the late Jim Mather, God rest his soul, he was a great
Mhm.
man. And Jim's company, um, International Martial Arts Management Systems, kind of coached me through the process of opening up my first studio.
Mhm.
And so I ran that studio for about 10 years and then got to the point to where, I just didn't want to run it anymore. I had a good buddy I was training with at the time that had just gotten riffed from the tech sector here in Austin. And he ended up with a, pretty large, severance package.
Yeah.
So he purchased a studio from me and took it over. And after I sold it to him, I realized it was a mistake because it's just it was my baby and I missed it. But oh well, it
Right.
was sold. So what are you going to do? So I'm
Right.
sitting around twiddling my thumbs, because I'm used to working, 50, 60 hours a week. Because I was a lifelong workaholic. Didn't know what to do with myself. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to write a book. And after 10 years of being in the martial arts industry and, going to, business seminars and, being, members of different consulting companies and so forth, I just did not like what I saw in the martial arts industry. I
Mhm.
thought a lot of what was taught as far as, business techniques and tactics and common practices in the industry was just slimy. And I had actually fallen prey to listening to some people that gave me bad advice, poor advice in my studio, and did
Mhm.
some things that were kind of, in a gray area of shady
Yeah.
and suffered for it and realized, you know what, I can't sleep well at night because of the way I'm running my business and I don't like it. So I went back to the old stuff that Jim used to teach me, and stuff that I'd figured out along the way and just ran my business honestly and ran a small studio and tried to keep the overhead low and the profit margins high and stay out on the floor as much as I could, interacting with my students. And I realized there were a lot of people out there who wanted to run studios the same way I did, who
Right.
didn't want to chase that big school dream, and chase the almighty dollar. And so that's when I wrote that book. And that was, gosh, man, 2003 is when I released it, I believe. So that
Okay.
was about 20 years ago. And after
Wow.
about 10 years of writing nonfiction books and courses and so forth, it was about the time that the Kindle platform, it was actually about 2011, I think, 2010 or 2011. My wife got me a Kindle. And so I started downloading all these books in the Kindle platform, and most of them were self published and they were horrible. So I was
Okay.
complaining to my wife about it. I'm like, because I like reading fantasy and sci-fi and stuff like that, and I was like, man, these books are just horrible. What are these people thinking? She's like, well, you think you could do it better? Maybe you should. And it just kind of occurred to me, well, maybe I should. So I started teaching myself how to write fiction, and I self-published my first fiction book in 2013. So that was about 10 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, what's the title?
So the first book that I published has been renamed, and as a matter of fact, I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to talk about my fiction
Okay.
novels, because
Okay.
I'll tell you, when I first started writing fiction and releasing fiction, there were a lot of people in the industry that don't like things that I have to say, because
Yeah,
I am very uh, I'm very critical of certain practices in the martial arts industry.
I
And
get
what
it.
happened
I
was is
get it.
that I let people know about the other side of what I do, and
Yeah,
man, I got so many negative reviews from people who just went and dropped negative reviews just because they hated my guts.
just to do
So
it. Oh, yeah, I
yeah,
get it. I
but
get it, brother.
if anybody wants to know what I write, you want to check out my fiction stuff, just go find me on Facebook. It's linked on there. So
Gotcha, gotcha.
yeah.
It's a sad thing about people. We got a lot of moody people out there, man. That's for sure, man.
Well, I think John Graydon said it one time. He said, a person doesn't go through the process of getting a high ranking black belt or multiple black belts in the martial arts, and spending so many hours, thousands of hours on learning self-defense, learning how to protect themselves, if they don't have some trauma in their background.
Mm,
And I'm paraphrasing him,
yeah.
but he was right. And a lot of the people who come to the martial arts world, there's a lot of unstable people that come to the martial arts world because they're kind of broken.
Yeah, brother.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
man, maybe you don't need jujitsu. Maybe you need some counseling first.
Maybe some therapy first, man.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
but I don't know. I mean, God bless him.
Well, uh, when we were growing up in the 80s, our therapy was getting punched in the face. So
Well, you know, I don't think we needed therapy that much, because
right.
we just dealt with it,
We just literally we just dealt with it, man. That's
just
right.
just rub some dirt on it, man, and keep going.
And keep going. I don't think I can ever go tell my dad, say my feelings are hurt. Somebody said something to me. My dad. Oh my
Man,
gosh.
gosh,
Oh
yeah,
wow.
my same thing. My dad was so old school, man. His nickname was Mad Dog,
Mad
and
dog. Oh wow.
yeah, and he was known for being kind of a hellraiser, and he used to carry like an axe handle in this truck that was like weighted with lead at the end and wrapped in electrical tape, and
Oh
you
my
know
gosh. He was
he
ready.
he had used it on a couple of people, man. He was crazy, but that was back in the day. It was back when you could get away with stuff like that before
Oh yeah.
before there were cameras before there were cameras
Cameras and
everywhere.
everything. Yeah, you can't get away
Yeah,
with nothing now. But that's
but
probably why a lot of these kids now are just little. I won't say a lot of kids aren't weak. They're just raised the wrong way. That's all it is. You
yeah.
know.
Well, a lot of these kids are raised by iPads, and that's the
Yeah.
sad thing
Yeah.
is that these
Yeah.
parents are they're disengaged, and they're trying to raise their kids with technology because, very frankly, I will say that today's society is not conducive to having a stable home life for your family, for your children. People
Yeah.
are, many people they're commuting, 2, 3 hours a day to work. They get home from work, they're dog tired. Their jobs expect them to
Absolutely.
work overtime, and by the time they get home, they just want to veg out, and they just pop some food in the microwave for the kid and set them down in front of the iPad, and you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
they just want to rest, and who can blame them?
That's right.
So, I think a lot of it has to do with the way society has driven us toward this. We have this information driven society now, and
Yeah.
all this technology hasn't been good for the family unit, not at
No,
all.
not at all. Not at all. And I see these kids running around with their little phones, and they're like 5, 6, 7 year old with a cell phone. I'm thinking, wow.
Not my
You
kid.
know. No. See, there
Nope.
you go. Not your kid. That's right,
Nope.
brother.
He
Oh
he
my.
he has a flip phone, like he has like an old
Old school
Nokia
flip
style
phone.
flip phone, old school, yeah. And
There you go.
it's just all it does is he can call on it, and he might be able to text if he's patient enough.
Right, if he's patient enough with old
Yeah,
BlackBerry or something like that.
yeah. And it
Oh
hasn't hurt
man.
him. He doesn't have any social media, nothing. I told him, I said, you turn 16 and you can decide whether you want to put your face all over social media. But
Man, that's
until you're old
smart.
enough to make that decision for yourself, we're not going to make it for you.
Brother, that is smart. That is so smart. Were your kids homeschooled too? Were your son homeschooled or?
No, he actually. So we moved to the community we live in. Has it was one of the best ISDs in Texas, right? We moved here
Mhm.
because of that, and it was actually a stretch for us financially at the time. But so he went to public school for until seventh grade, and then we pulled him. Oh, actually sixth grade because that's when middle school starts here. And when he
Yeah.
hit middle school, it was also kind of the pandemic thing was happening, and
Yeah.
so we pulled him out. We put him in a private school. So he's been in private school for a few years, and I think he'll probably stay there till he graduates. He likes it.
Yeah.
It's a small school, and
Yeah.
they're very tight knit, and I mean, he's learning, actually learning academics, and
Mhm. Mhm.
he also he gets the word of God every day too. So
Oh, praise God. That's what they need, man. That's what they need. I'm a believer also, but I just take it. We've taken God out of so many things. I'm gonna jump on this real quick. We've taken
go
God
ahead.
out of so many things out there. We're taking him out of the school system, out of the morality of the children, and we sit back and wonder, what's wrong with our youth?
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
tell you exactly what's wrong with it. But
Well,
man, no, go ahead, brother.
people are unmoored.
Yeah.
They are unmoored from their family units. They're unmoored from their support systems in
Yeah.
society. They're unmoored from the culture at large. And for those people who grew up in faith-based homes, I think people are unmoored from their belief systems as well. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you something. Writing fantasy fiction novels, a lot of my readers are, they are unchurched or they are non-Christian people. They're either
Mm.
atheists or agnostics. Some of them are Wiccans or pagans or whatever. And I just love those people, man. I just love
Yeah.
them. I
Yeah.
don't I don't talk about my religion to my readers, and my my outpost on social media, they're
Mhm.
completely apolitical and they're a-religious, simply because I want to make that space welcome for everybody, right?
That's pretty
But
cool.
in my heart, what I'm really trying to do is when I interact with my readers is, they all know that I'm Christian because,
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't hide it. But I think to myself, I'm like, okay, so what if I'm the only Christian these people ever come into contact with that they have a positive experience with in their entire life,
Wow, that's
And
awesome.
so I just I think that, yeah, a lot of people are divorced from God and we've taken God out of schools and so forth, but,
Yeah.
society's changed a lot. And,
Yeah.
we're in a situation as Christians where we have to be, and we have to be understanding of other people and other people's beliefs in order to be good witnesses,
You know what? That's powerful right there. You're absolutely right. That's powerful. We can't be judgmental. We can just be loving.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man. Brother, you have a lot to offer out there, man. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah. Well, people who know, I mean, I'm just as much of a knucklehead as anybody else. So,
We all have that one side to us, but sometimes we show it more than we need to.
yeah, yeah.
Oh man. And so, I know we ended up here, man, and wow, I do want this to run for a little bit longer, man. Just to listen to you talk about, your belief system. That's really powerful, man. I tell you, we need more guys like you out there. But before we get you out of here, tell me how to reach you. Tell everybody how to reach to you. Give us all your stuff so they can reach out to you.
Yeah, well, if people are interested in just say you're a martial arts instructor, and maybe your martial arts school is struggling, you need some help. I have a couple of different ways, a couple of different resources that can help people. So my blog, which has been around for forever, I think I started that blog in 2008, is martialartsbusinessdaily.com. My coaching website, I have two coaching websites. One of them is mainly for people who want courses, and the other one's for my app, which also has business training courses. So the coaching website with the courses on it is dojosuccesscoach.com. And then the app can be found at mabizu.com. That's mabizu.com. So yeah, and if you're short on money, just go to Amazon and look me up, Mike Massie, and you'll find a library of martial arts business books that I've written that cover every aspect of starting and running a martial arts school. And you can get them all for like the whole library for under $50. So
Wow.
that's a
Wow.
great place for anybody to start, if because and the reason why I put those books on Amazon, I made them so cheap, was because I remember what it was like when I was struggling to start a martial arts studio. So
Absolutely. Wow, you have such a great heart, man. No joke. I'm not just blowing sunshine here. I'm serious, man. Your
I
heart is
appreciate that.
huge,
Thank you,
man.
Tony.
That's awesome, brother.
Yeah.
But you know what? I appreciate you more. Guys, listen up. That's been Michael Massey. I'm sorry, I don't want to short your name by Mike, but
Oh, either's
uh,
fine.
either's fine. I appreciate him so much, guys. Listen to his stuff. Go ahead and reach out to him. You can find him on Facebook, find him on all the things he's talking about there. You will definitely get something out of it. Mike, I appreciate you more than you know, brother. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know you're a busy guy, but appreciate you sitting down with us today, man.
Sure thing, man. And Tony, thanks for having me on the show, and God bless, and I'll pray for your sister too, all right?
Hey, I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself out there, brother.
All right.
All right, bye-bye.
Oh, man.